Hi, my name is Randy Bailey, and I'm a database administrator. I've been working in the industry for about 7 years now. I also teach SQL Server, Transact SQL, and relational database design at OCCC. I typically talk and get excited about optimization and SSIS and some other things, but today I decided to make a presentation on using SQL Server Express in production because there's just not a lot of people excited about that, I guess. Not a lot of articles that I found. The why. So quite simply, I would say because it's free. That's a really good reason. And Microsoft says we can. So here's a snippet I took just this morning from MSDN. It's basically all the additions and their licensing models for SQL Server 2017. We're looking at Express through in the Enterprise Edition. I've just highlighted Express, and notice in the description it says it's a free entry-level database that's designed for learning as well as building desktop and small server data-driven applications up to 10 gigabytes, also free. In the next slide, we see limitations. Notice that Express is limited to 4 cores for processing, about 1 gigabyte for the buffer cache, and 10 gigabytes for a single database. Now, that's a single database, not every database on the instance, so you can have multiple databases up to 10 gigabytes. At the very bottom, you see that little blue circle. That's in the production use rights. Now, I bring this up because a lot of people tend to get developer mixed up with Express. A lot of people say, well, you can't really use Express in a production environment, but actually you can. You can for small applications, and it should be for small applications. Developer was the addition that Microsoft intended for people to test their solutions on before they actually implement it in production. So that's one they're probably mistaken with. So is Express, right for my production environment? Some of the questions I would probably ask is, what's the nature of the work, right? Are we going to do reporting? How many users are going to be using this, concurrency? It's important to look at the thresholds we were just talking about when I was talking about maybe 1 gigabyte in buffer cache a moment ago. So the buffer cache is a place that SQL uses to put data pages in for indexes and pieces of tables so it can do its processing without having to go out to the disk, right? So if you can't put everything up in there, if we got a lot of work going on, right, and we're going over that threshold, then maybe Express it might not be for you for this specific purpose. Maybe standard, you might opt for that or above. How large will my databases become, right? Obviously, I'm not going to try to put a 10 gigabyte database for anything that I anticipate growing above 10 gigabytes in an Express instance. That's just asking for trouble. However, some of you are probably wondering right now, what would happen if my database did reach 10 gigabytes? Well, how many of you guys have seen the run out of log space message you get when you run out of log space? It's pretty similar to that. It basically says there's not enough room in the file group. You need to reduce some data or increase it or something. But you don't have to worry too much because SQL Express upgrades just like any other version. So you can go straight to standard if you have a procedure in place to do so. And there's some processes that I have put in place to kind of detect that along the way, so I'm ready for it. But moving on. There's some features lost, obviously. They're not going to give it to us for free, everything. So no transparent data encryption. There's no enterprise data management, so MDS and DQS. No availability groups. There's some management tools aren't available, like Profiler and Database Tuning Advisor. And most notoriously, the one that turns off DBAs almost immediately when they look at Express is there's no SQL agent. So if you don't have anything to schedule your jobs and log the outcome of those jobs over time, it's automatically a big turnoff, So a lot of DBAs, unfortunately, might go out and try to buy a third-party application or something to perform scheduling for them. Today, I'm going to be talking about 2 different ways to alleviate that. One would be using Windows Scheduler. The other, using a remote agent on maybe an instance where there's not a lot of work being performed that I could use as a centralized sort of agent. So I'm not going to rattle these off for the sake of time, but essentially, basically everything else is there. Programmatically, SQL Express is just as good as a standard edition or enterprise, all right? Minus those thresholds we talked about a second ago. A lot of people also think that there might be a resource governor on the amount of connections that you can have with Express, and that doesn't exist as well. You can have just as many connections, as many as Microsoft will allow, and I don't have that number on hand. So quite a few. Okay, so I'm going to get into the how now, so how I did it, and I did it about 2 years ago I started doing this. Ideally, for creating a solution for managing Express is something that's simple, yet configurable, that maintenance scripts, I could use maintenance scripts like Ola Halgren's solution. Who uses Ola's stuff? I know I do. I've been using it for years. Almost every shop I've worked at has Ola's stuff. It just works. It's tried and true. It's great. Ola Halgren, the maintenance solution, it's a Transact SQL script out on the internet. Basically, it's there for, has index maintenance, integrity check, and database backups, some other things here. It's great. It's free, and it's awesome, and it's light. So tasks can be scheduled with Windows Scheduler locally or another SQL Server agent, like I said a second ago, if you have one available. Not everyone does. It should have notification and logging abilities. I need to have something to report on and something to tell me if something's failing or not available. And obviously, I would like it to be easily deployable, to be able to be scripted, right, or automated for all the DevOps folks. So all those things, my solution with Ola's stuff accounts for. So here's just a little demo of Ola's solution for those of you who aren't familiar. I decided to put this up here. The first one is doing a backup command. It's basically passing these parameters in here to basically tell it to, what kind of backup, if it's a copy only, whatnot, database compression. Note Express doesn't have compression, I believe. Yes. The amount of time that you, for data retention, so it'll clean up files after a given set amount of hours, so 744, it'll go back 31 days and remove all the database backups after that point. So nice for cleaning up data retention, Index fragmentation, so you could set it to where any index that's fragmented less than 5%, this is default, it skips. 5 to 30% it rebuilds, and then anything over 30%, 5 to 30% it reorganizes. Anything over 30% it just rebuilds from scratch, so by default. And then of course integrity checks. So when you apply Ola script, it creates, I've highlighted it in the red box. It creates a command log table in whatever database you specify. I like to make a utility database because I don't want things in my system databases. And then it adds about 4 procedures for index work for backups and integrity checks. Here's just kind of a layout. It's a rough layout. I don't claim to be an artist of the plan that I was going to set forth a couple of years ago. Like I said, I wanted to use an external agent. I have listed out about 5 expressed instances as an example. So my external agent would execute my scripts via SSIS or command, however I want to throw at it, to the Express instance where it would execute stored procedures that would run Ola scripts and log it for me locally on that server. So I have a local log and an agent log from where the agent executed. So in 2 different places I can report on. And then lastly, if it was doing a backup, for example, it would place the backups on the data domain, given the securities were implemented correctly. So just an execution summary. We want to kick off the job remotely. And the procedures will log if there's a failure or success locally. And we'll also have those logs in agent if done remotely. So I'm accommodating for being able to do it with Windows Scheduler or SQL agent remotely, essentially. Might be hard to see these, sorry, but I took a couple screenshots of the stored procedures that I wrote. Notice everything in the SCA schema, prefixed SCA. Those are all the procedures that I wrote to basically utilize and error handle some OLA scripts when it runs to log the execution locally, so I have to look at those and audit my jobs. But I'm essentially right here for the backup job. I'm running a procedure that's going to pass all my configuration to OLA scripts. I didn't modify any of this stuff at all. And then just some simple try-catch methods to basically log it. And right here, it's calling a procedure to insert that into a log history table, right? The task ID, the start time, end time, runtime, outcome, and local execution, whether or not it was done with Windows Scheduler or the agent. And this is what it looks like here. So my two tables, I have the maintenance log history and the maintenance queue. So we have task ID number 2, backup database user was run on this given time. It ended at this time. And in the log table, I have the runtime, the outcome, like I said, whether or not it was ran locally or not. So over time, as you can see, all my maintenance jobs are kind of logged here. And I have other procedures in here that'll go out here and fetch all those logs and pull them back to my agent server where they're all centralized. So I have all my Express servers. I'm pulling in all these logs so I can report all of them in one place. So it's pretty nice, I think. A couple things to consider. Cleaning up local logs. So I said there's a 10 gigabyte limit on the Express instance, right? Well, you don't want your logs to, it might take a long time to get there, but you need a job to make sure that your logs don't grow too big. I mean, they'd be defeating a lot of purpose there. You could do that during the centralization process that I was speaking of, that I handled. Another thing is if you're using Windows Scheduler, you might not have you might have a lack. Well, with Agent, I was able to have notifications sent natively through that SQL agent. You have to set up database mail in Express to be able to utilize that, and there's not a GUI in Express. So I actually put the link there, which had some steps where you can, via script, enable database mail and configure your own SMTP alerts that way, programmatically. So you'll have to figure that out with Windows Scheduler, but I got it to work once. I just haven't had to use Windows Scheduler. So database growth thresholds. So as we're getting closer to that 10 gigabytes, like I said earlier, I have jobs that run every so often to make sure that the database size is within reason. As it gets up to 75% of that capacity, it'll alert me, hey, this thing's growing. We need to account for this. If it gets within 90, it'll give us a critical alert, and we have a procedure for upgrading that to standard edition, if need be, or reduce data size. It's a case-by-case basis. So, building a heartbeat monitor. Once again, if you're using Windows Scheduler, if that server goes down, then you're not going to get any alerts, right? So you need something to check on that server. So a remote server, setting up a job that could query a system table just to return a result would work probably just fine. So. Any questions? Would you not be allowed to have the SQL Server agent hit the Express database? I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be allowed to. Just like Express, we're allowed to use it for any database, any application really. They just put the thresholds on us so we can't go over that limit. But I haven't read or seen any reason why we couldn't interact with that database from a different agent. And that's actually what most reasonable solutions I found online were, and that's what we ended up doing. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.